It's Ash from Super Videos back for another video. This is going to be my things you may have missed and Easter eggs for 709 or the mid-season premiere, which was called Rock in the Road. So the first thing at the beginning of the episode, we have Father Gabriel packing up all of the supplies they have at Alexandria and driving off in the car. And if you change the exposure of the shot and make it brighter, you can actually see as he's driving away, there's someone beside him that pops up. So there's a person sitting next to him. Now we don't know if this person is in the front seat or the back seat, but there's definitely someone in there with him. So he's not alone. I already did a separate video talking about this in detail, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. So the next thing is when the conversation with Gregory is done at the hilltop, we have Enid coming in and telling them that she has found some people who would want to join in from the members of the hilltop. And the one member there, her name is Birdie. She introduces herself and everything. So Birdie is the exact same person that Rick and the others saved when they were first going to the hilltop. So in episode 611, which was called Knots Untie, you see Rick, Daryl, and the others saving some members of the hilltop, and Birdie's actually one of those people. Then before Jesus tells the group about the kingdom, we have Daryl talking about blowing up the saviors because they know where they are. And that was very interesting because it ties up to what Daryl did. Because if you remember, back in 6-9, which was No Way Out, we actually did see Daryl blow up a bunch of the saviors with the RPG. So it's cool that he's talking about blowing them up and he's the one that blew up some of the saviors previously. And to add to that, later on, they find explosives as well. So it's like foreshadowing that in a way as well. So that was very cool. And then the other cool part of this was Tara. Because Tara says there could be non-fighters there. There could be good people there. So kind of saying that we shouldn't blow them up because there could be good people at the sanctuary and that they're not all fighters and bad people. Which is very interesting, and it kind of relates to Tara's story as well, because of course Tara was on the governor's side when the governor attacked. So it's cool that there's this parallelism that's existing between the governor's story arc and Negan's story arc. So that was very cool as well. And then right before Jesus tells them about the kingdom and Ezekiel, he shows them this radio that he has taken from the saviors. And if you go back and take a look at the scene where Daryl is killing Fat Joey, you can actually see that Jesus takes the radio. So the radio Jesus has in this episode is the same one that he took off of Fat Joey. Then when Rick and the others get to the kingdom and they're introduced to Ezekiel, when they see Shiva the tiger for the first time, they have this sort of shocked reaction, which is very cool because if you look back at when Carol was getting introduced to Shiva and Ezekiel, she had the same sort of reaction. So there's some similarities between these two scenes, which was very interesting. And then when they're talking about what they're going to do with the saviors, of course, Morgan finds out Abraham, Glenn, Spencer, and Olivia have been killed by the saviors. And then we have Rosita saying, "Are you going to say that I told you so?" to Morgan, which is basically bringing up the argument that Morgan had before they attacked Negan's outpost. The one time they did back in season 6. I don't know which episode it was, but it was called Not Tomorrow Yet. So Rosita is bringing up that conversation they had at the church back then when Morgan was disagreeing with attacking the saviors. When Morgan is talking about his opinions, he said that maybe we could find another way. We could find a way to just capture Negan and hold him, which is very cool because for comic readers, you know what's coming for Negan. What Morgan is saying is foreshadowing what's to come in the future in the TV show, which is very cool. Then there's this shot at the kingdom. We see in the background, there's some people training with the staff, and it's very cool because before Morgan got there, none of them thought about using the staff to protect themselves. So it seems like Morgan is not only training Benjamin and teaching him how to use the staff and protect himself, but he's also teaching other kingdomers as well, which is very cool. Now we do know that this is not Benjamin because Benjamin was inside with Ezekiel when they were all outside. We know that Benjamin is not one of these two people that's training. So it definitely looks like Morgan has taught other kingdomers how to use the staff and protect themselves, which is very cool. Then there's this part where Ezekiel is telling a story of some sorts to Benjamin's little brother as he's about to go to sleep. And that story is actually part of a speech that Martin Luther King gave, the famous I Have a Dream speech. That's very cool. And given that Ezekiel is acting like a king and the scenario they're in, it's kind of like they're the Savior's slaves, and putting that together with the I Have a Dream speech and the message that's in that speech, you can see how many similarities there are between that real scenario, that real thing that happened in history, and what they're showcasing in this world and in this TV show. So that was very cool. And then there's this part right before Ezekiel reveals that he is not going to join the fight. He is looking at a couple of kids that are kingdomers, and some of them have lost their limbs and stuff like that. And if you watch Talking Dead, which is right after the episode, you do know that Greg Nicotero, who's one of the executive producers, and he was the director of this episode as well, he did say that those were actually his own kids. So that's very cool that Greg Nicotero's kids have made a cameo in this episode. Once they leave the kingdom, they are faced with this roadblock of cars, and at the same time, they have Negan on the radio talking to Simon and some other saviors and saying what he has to say about Fat Joey's death. And if you actually listen to what he's saying, he's actually bringing up one of the moments in the episode when Carl went to the sanctuary. Because if you remember in that episode, there's one scene where Fat Joey brings Negan Lucille. Negan cracks a joke about it. And then in this episode, in the radio, Negan is bringing up the same joke. But also, there's another thing that's very cool to me. It doesn't have any significance. It's just very funny and very cool. When Negan says, without Fat Joey, Skinny Joey is just Joey. What he's saying is basically that the Saviors had two Joeys. One was skinny, one was fat. So they called one Skinny Joey and they called the other Fat Joey. And now he's saying without Fat Joey being there and with Fat Joey being dead, they don't really need to call Skinny Joey anymore, because there's only one of the Joeys left, so they just call him Joey. So that was very cool as well. And then coming back to the roadblock, this is actually not the first time the Saviors use roadblocks to control who gets in, gets out, and where people go. Because if you remember back in 616, they used the same sort of roadblock to block survivors from getting to the hilltop. One of those roadblocks was just them standing around. The other was with walkers and things like that. So it seems like the roadblock strategy is something the Saviors do all the time to limit traffic on the roads they want to control. And then when they're taking the dynamite, there's this one scene where Rosita looks at one of the dynamites and says, "I don't like the look of that." And she puts that dynamite down on the ground and doesn't take it with her. And then later on, where they're driving off, in the background, there's an explosion. So one of the dynamites explodes. That dynamite is actually the exact same one that Rosita put down. So that's why right after that explosion, we have Rosita saying, "Yeah, I didn't like the look of that shit at all." So that's very cool as well. And then the conversation between Michonne and Rick. We have Michonne saying, "We're the ones who live." Of course, she said the same thing in 708 as well. And I think that this is an Easter egg for something that's going to be coming up later on, probably at the end of this season. And for comic readers, you know what I'm actually referring to. But I do have a separate video talking about this subject as well, so you can find that in the video list as well on the channel. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. All I'm going to say is that there is a scene in the comics where someone says, "We don't die." And this scene is kind of connected to that, which is very cool. And then the last thing, when Rick and the others find the note that says boat, and then they make their way to that location with the boat, that location with the boats is actually the exact same location that Rick and Aaron went to in 708 to take supplies, and it was actually the first time that we saw the mysterious boots-wearing person as well. So it's the same exact spot, and it seems like the junkyard area or the community is very close to the boat area as well, so that's cool. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll be back for another video.